Hi, I'm Angus Cress Gillespie, your host for East Brunswick Television, and I'm here with Jeanie Bryson, an East Brunswick resident and a well-known popular singer. She's here today to share with us her memories of her late husband, Coleman Mellet, who was killed in an airplane crash back in 2009, some 10 years ago. Mellet was an accomplished jazz guitarist. Jeanie, an accomplished musician in her own right, is currently working on a project to document Mellet's short-lived career. It's my pleasure to welcome Jeanie Bryson to our studio today. So Jeanie, I understand you're involved with a project about Coley's music. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, first of all, I have a Facebook page that has all the information about it. It's called the Coleman Mellet Music and Film Project. And that has encompassed both the CD that we produced and a documentary film about making the CD. And what happened was that after he passed away, the music that he had been working on was left behind in his computer. And a wonderful producer, Barry Miles, Grammy-winning producer, and I decided to have Barry take the music, take the computer, get a wonderful engineer, and compile all the little bits and pieces of what Coley had been working on, because when you do it yourself in your home studio, it's just hundreds of tracks of takes and everything. And Barry spent a year putting the music together. And then the next stage of it was to find the musicians to perform his music. And that included Steve Gadd on drums, Will Lee on bass, Chuck Mangione played the flugelhorn, and actually even James Taylor himself sang and played rhythm guitar on one song. And it's really quite an extraordinary project. And the film reflects what was happening in the studio and how everybody felt about coming together and making Coley's music come alive and stay alive even though he was gone. So that's what I've been working on. And actually this year, the record will be out and the film will be released. So this is a long time coming, but we've been working on it very, very hard.
He died in an airplane crash near Buffalo.
Yes, 5 miles from the airport.
Did they ever figure out what happened to the plane?
Yes, very quickly. Unfortunately, the pilots were not trained properly. They weren't rested properly, and they basically did everything wrong that you could possibly do in the circumstances that were in front of them. Ultimately, putting the nose up instead of pushing the nose down. Whenever you're in a stall, apparently the first thing you learn is you never pull back, you go down and then kind of swoop up. And they did exactly the opposite thing, which caused the plane to stall completely and just fall to the ground. This was complete pilot error, and you know, the laws were changed. President Obama ended up increasing the training, the number of hours needed for training, from 200 to 800.
Wow.
We wanted it to be 1,600.
Wow.
So a lot of, I don't mean to scare anybody, but a lot of the smaller air what are they called?
Air traffic control?
No. The small planes, commuter planes.
Yeah.
The commuter,
short haul.
Those pilots don't have the same training as the other pilots, and you know, the way we look at it, shouldn't all pilots be trained well? Why is there a kind of a JV team of pilots? And so that's what we're trying to make a universal standard, so every pilot has good training. So that's one of the things that But of course, there's lobbyists and there's people, people get money,
Things change slowly.
Yes, but this is something that really shouldn't be changing slowly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's getting, it has improved. There's been no crashes since then, but it was a horrendous, horrendous thing.
Yeah. So anyway, this project is to honor his music and his memory.
Well, yeah, even more than honoring, he was working on his original music. He was Chuck Mangione's guitar player and worked with Chuck for 10 years. So that was kind of his day gig,
Yeah.
And then at home in our studio, he was working on originals for quite a long time.
Did you know at the time that he was working on originals?
I did, but there are hours and hours of time that I'm not hearing anything. I'm just, doors shut and I hear stuff coming out of his room. But when I finally realized what he was doing, I really encouraged him to reach out to Barry Miles, who I worked with 30 years ago. And only 6 months before Coley died, I made Coley and Barry meet, and they started exchanging music, and Coley was asking him to do the piano parts on the record. So the project had already begun by the time Coley passed away. And then at that point, Barry Miles said to me, let's finish this record. And it took him a year, but he did finish it.
Wow.
Yeah.
The first time I saw him perform live, Jeanie was singing, but he did a couple of duets with her. And I said, this is a seriously talented guy.
And the tender way you kiss me.
He just had a certain happiness and joy.
Turns 1 minute without you into an endless way.
But the recording itself, there were a lot of problems with it. The sound quality wasn't anywhere near as good as the quality we were working with.
We recorded this 10 years ago.
So I said to Barry, is there any way we can extract the vocals and Coley's guitar and re-record it? And Barry's like, I don't know. Let's try it.
The way you smile.
Basically, we just took her voice, his voice, and a little bit of his guitar and just redid the whole song.
And the tender way you kiss me. Turns 1 minute without you into an endless way. I don't know what I would do without you. Now I just don't have to wonder anymore. 'Cause I got you.
It's the only recording I have of us singing together.
Amazing talent. Coleman Mellet wasn't just a musician. He was music. He definitely gave me everything I could ever want, and probably would have given me more if I had even known what he had in his desk drawer. And I was really overwhelmed and honored that I was asked to participate in this particular project.
I heard something that reminds me of Steely Dan in that it sounds like it's got longevity. It's something that was made at a certain time that I think will sound great forever.
Coley's intentions and the kind of person he was have spread to so many people that this project was able to happen.
Carry me home. Take me by land or sea.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but what's it like being a famous person in East Brunswick?
Well,
East Brunswick kind of an obscure suburb.
Well, I grew up here. You know, I was raised here. You know, fame is relative. I mean, if you ask a jazz geek, you know, that likes women jazz singers who I am, they might know who I am, but I'm definitely not a famous, you know, I'm not Celine Dion or anything. So yeah, I mostly people know me from the area because I grew up here. So I'll be in Home Depot and run into an old friend, or I actually used to deliver mail in East Brunswick.
So they
in
know
my
you-
in my youth. So I know people from all sorts of reasons.
So they know you as Jeanie, not as a
Oh,
big singer.
definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah. Well, still, you could always name drop Dizzy Gillespie. What was it like having Dizzy Gillespie as a father?
Well, I think that there were some things that I learned later on that probably affected my life as a singer. But when I was little, it didn't. I didn't think about it very much. But as I grew up and would see him performing and being backstage, I think it showed me how wonderful the world of musicians can be. The camaraderie, the friendships with the members of the band. So I think that affected me later on when I really thought about what it was like being around all the musicians and how much fun it seemed like it was being on stage.
So it's almost like it was working on your subconscious when you were a youngster.
Absolutely, and I really didn't realize it until I started doing interviews and talking about it, and I would be asked about my influences, and of course my mom was a huge influence because she was a songwriter, and I would see her working on her music and, you know, agonizing over her little lyric changes. But with my father, it was more, yes, by osmosis, I used to say, and
Yeah.
I really loved being backstage and then being in the audience and seeing how people loved him and mostly how much fun he was having. And it seemed like this might be a pretty good thing to do. So
you were exposed to it.
oh, definitely, yes.
yeah.
You know, it was a secret. My relationship with my father was not discussed until after he died. It came out just about the time that I got signed to my first record deal in 1993. So it was not discussed. Nobody knew. It was just a secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get started in the music business?
Well, as I said, my mom was a songwriter, is a songwriter. She's still with us, very healthy. And I guess my first real, well, my first time singing in front of people was at the Livingston College pub.
Huh.
And I sang, I went to school at Livingston.
Let me get, the drinking age was 18 back then.
That's exactly right. I started college when I was 16. So at about 18, I went in with a little talent show, and I made the mistake of singing a very kind of esoteric tune with my friend that I think it might have been a Michel Legrand tune that was not what people wanted to hear, and I think I got booed, but it was midnight and people were drinking, so I just kind of slunk off, and that was it. But I did meet a lot of great musicians at Livingston, Terrence Blanchard, Steve Nelson, Frank Lacey. These are all huge people in jazz now, and we were all there. So I just got my feet wet. Kenny Barron was my keyboard harmony teacher. And I just thought everybody did music. It didn't occur to me that I was doing anything special. And then in my early 20s, I answered an ad down near Princeton looking for a singer. And we went to the Rusty Scupper in Princeton. We auditioned and we got the gig. And that was one of my first gigs, and I was about 22. And I never looked back. I just kept on getting hired. You know, back then, you know, you could get a gig in a restaurant and work there for a year, and they weren't trying to rotate people. It was just like, this is your gig, and it was easy to work. It was.
And that's not the case anymore. So.
No, not so much. I mean, there are some great venues and great places to play. New Brunswick actually has a fantastic group of people, the New Brunswick Jazz Project, and they showed jazz 4 nights a week in New Brunswick. I mean, it's unbelievable, but it's rare.
What did you major in at Livingston?
Anthropology.
Huh.
And as my grandfather would say, what are you going to do with that? And I said, I don't know, but it's interesting. So it was anthropology, and my minor was ethnomusicology.
Oh, well, that's relevant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I had a a wonderful professor, Barbara Benary. I'm sure you remember Barbara. She played classical Indian violin. She taught us Indian ragas. I sang Balkan music with that funny yodel in my voice. I played in the gamelan and was a soloist and sang in Javanese. So I had a very eclectic background at Livingston.
Do you have your own band?
Well, that's a good question. And, you know, with jazz people, it's very rare to have a band like the Beatles. You know, we are all freelancers.
Or like bluegrass or
yes.
country.
What you do is you learn the tunes. There's kind of a language that we all speak.
A standard repertoire.
Standard repertoire, the fake books from the old days, you know. And these are standards that were written in anywhere from the 30s to the 70s. And we all know them. You learn them. And the musicians hopefully can play them in the key that you sing them in.
And so, in a sense, it doesn't matter as long as the band is competent.
Well, ultimately, of course it matters. I mean, I've done tours and concerts, you know, where I have to, you know, have it at a different level, especially if I'm doing original music. But basically, any competent jazz musician that is familiar with the standard repertoire can go in, and for instance, I was in Istanbul, and I went by myself, and I flew over there, and I was introduced to the band, and it was a trio, and I said, here's my charts. We worked on it, and I had a 5-day gig working with people I'd never met, and it was fine.
Have you ever worked cruise ships?
Never. But I love the water. I would have loved to have done that.
Yeah. So I was looking at your website, and so what genre would you classify? Is it jazz? Is it pop? Is it Latin?
Well, I think officially it's jazz, but I like to bend the parameters of what I do. I'm a child of the 70s as far as the music that I love. So, for instance, on my latest, the last CD I did, 3 tunes kind of that I loved as a young adult growing up. A Phoebe Snow tune, Roberta Flack, and Todd Rundgren. So these were songs that meant something to me, and if you play with great jazz musicians, you have a jazz sensibility to the arrangement, and it becomes jazz.
Yeah.
So
I assume you must have done many nightclubs.
Yep, lots. Yeah.
In New York, Chicago, L.A.
All of the above. Yes.
Wow.
In New York, I played. I've had 2 weeks at the Village Vanguard with my band, which was amazing because at the time they almost never had singers. Never. I mean, it was so rare. Shirley Horn, Abby Lincoln, but basically, I think Lorraine Gordon, who owned the club, just took a liking to me and said, you know what, we're putting you in, and that was pretty unbelievable.
So that would classify as a lucky break.
Yes, it was a lucky break, but she brought me back again, so it was also that she liked us.
You were validated.
Yes.
Yeah.
I played at the Blue Note in New York, pretty much all the clubs in New York, and I played at the Green Mill in Chicago. I've done LA, and when I was on tour with Terrence Blanchard, when we did the Billie Holiday songbook, we were on tour for 6 months, and we traveled all over the world. We did every major festival, Monterey, Newport, Chicago, Atlanta, Toronto. We were all over the place. So yeah, I've been lucky, and I've had some great experiences.
Has it ever bothered you in nightclubs that the patrons are drinking? Are they inattentive sometimes?
Well, more in restaurants, like in the beginning, when you'd be in a restaurant and it was noisy. You know, if you're going to the Blue Note and you're paying $50 to see someone and having dinner, it's rare that people are jabbering. I mean, sometimes you get people that just have no clue what's happening. But for instance, at the Village Vanguard, Lorraine Gordon would go up and tap someone on the shoulder and tell them to be quiet.
Oh, wow.
You know, oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of, there's kind of a reverential respect for the room.
That's good.
In a place like the Vanguard, you know.
What about the Rusty Scupper?
That was noisy. And, anyway, I was singing behind a potted palm. I put myself there specifically because it was my first gig, and I was actually very shy about people looking at me when I was singing. So I kind of positioned myself in front of the palm, and I remember seeing people look around like, where's the singer? And I was right behind a big old palm tree. Yeah, that's noisy. That's not as nice.
But you grew out of your shyness.
I did, but just from doing it. You know, it's not, I don't think it's anything you can really learn. I just had to feel comfortable with what I was doing, and then I kind of forgot about the audience.
Yeah. So what are your major influences?
Well, as I said, being a child that grew up with kind of American pop music, you know, I loved the Allman Brothers as a kid. I loved James Taylor, Carole King, just kind of the standard music that all of us were listening to at the time, pop radio, Seals and Crofts, you know, stuff like that. But when I started getting into jazz, and my family listened to, my mother had a great record collection, as did my grandparents. And so...
Are these 33s?
Yes, 33s,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I listened to...
Do you still have them?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I haven't... In fact, I just got a turntable a little while ago, and I played a record for my grandkids, and they were just... They'd never seen a record player. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But they were dancing so much that the record was skipping because my house shakes a little bit. So I had to say, if you're going to dance, you got to be a little cool, you know.
Yeah.
But then later on, well, I loved Dinah Washington. Carmen McRae might be my favorite. Well, Shirley Horn, and then contemporaries, Roberta Flack, Dionne Warwick. I guess I take my influences, anybody that's singing with a very specific attention to lyrics is what I'm interested in, because I hone in on lyrics. That's just the kind of singer I am. Some singers like a Sarah Vaughan or an Ella, they're just interested in all the things you can do with your voice that embellish a melody and change a melody and do things, and that's not so much where I'm coming from.
You're interested in the story.
I am.
But you mentioned yodeling a while back.
Well,
How did you pick that up?
Well, I had to do it because that was required for the Balkan music. I mean, they have, I can't do it anymore. I actually tried fairly recently. I thought, well, I lost that skill, but I do love it.
Did you ever listen to Jimmy Rogers?
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, oh, sure. I mean, yeah, you can sneak that in every once in a while, but Joe Williams could do it too.
Yeah. Do you have a record label?
Well, I have been on several record labels. I don't have my own, but I was on Telarc for years, which was a kind of an audiophile label. They were known for their fine sound. In fact, once I went. Do you remember the high fidelity stereo store that was in New Brunswick for years? Hi-Fi Haven. I think it was called, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Anyway, they sold very high-end stuff. I went in there a little after my first record was out, and lo and behold, they had my record in there as a test to show what high-fidelity jazz could sound like.
Wow.
Because Telarc was known for that. So I walked in and I said, this is my record, and it was kind of cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very gratifying.
It was.
Yeah.
It had beautiful sound. They were really into the sound.
Yeah. How has your music evolved over the years?
Well, I think that it took a while to find my own voice. You know, when I first started singing, I was actually a pretty good mimic. And one of the best ways to, you know, I guess imitation is the best form of flattery. So I loved Carmen, I loved Dinah, and I would learn their tunes by rote. And as you find your own voice, and I guess this happens not just with singers, but with horn players. You know, you listen to Stan Getz, and you sound a little bit like Stan Getz. But I think I just started figuring out what I wanted to say musically, and then I started moving away from how other singers that I loved would interpret a song, and figured out how to do it myself. But that takes some time.
Well, your confidence increased.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also just my knowledge and working with better musicians. I think that the best thing that ever happened to me was working with musicians that were way more experienced than I was, and more versed in where I was trying to go.
So, is it fair to say you've been seeking fame and fortune?
I would say that is not fair, no.
Okay.
And I know very few jazz singers, jazz musicians that really feel that way. This is not a music that you do because you think you're going to get rich and famous. This is a music that you do because you love it, and it speaks to you.
And perhaps you can't think of anything else you'd rather do.
Oh, definitely not. I used to joke and say, "What else am I going to do? I have no more. I have no other skills." that was my little line I would say to myself.
So, what advice do you have for young people who might want to grow up and become singers?
Well, I've actually spoken to some colleges and some high schools over the years. I think that, well, to be true to yourself, you need to listen to good music. I think a lot of singers, I think the best thing to do is to really go back and listen to the people that really made the music, the real trailblazers in singing, which would be the Billie Holidays, Dinah, Sarah, Ella. It's important to listen to them, because
And maybe learn their stuff.
learn their tunes. As I said before, you might want to learn someone's interpretation of it. That's okay if you're a kid. As you get older, you'll figure out your own voice. But I think it's important. A lot of singers now, I think, maybe listen to R&B singers or singers that aren't really jazz singers, and I think it's hard to turn back the clock. I think you need to go back and know where you come from, know where the music comes from.
And know the history.
Know the history.
And so, how can fans get access to your music?
Well, it's on iTunes, it's on Amazon, it's kind of everywhere. Just type in my name and songs will pop up, I guess.
Do you have a website?
I let it go. I did have one, a really nice one. I'm going to be doing it again, so just JeanieBryson.com. I still own the name, so I'll be doing some more of that soon.
Well, we look forward to it.
Yes. Oh, well, actually, probably I'll be releasing 2 records that I recorded a long time ago, but I'm going to try to release for the first time. One's a record that I did with the Metropole Orchestra, a 56-piece orchestra in Holland, and another is a record that I did with Kenny Barron before my Telarc recordings at Rudy Van Gelder's studio in Inglewood. So both of those have never been released, and I'm talking right now to people about releasing those.
Well, we'll look forward to them.
Definitely.
Jeannie, thank you so much for coming out here to East Brunswick.
So nice to see you.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, baby. You let my love get